didn't envision it this way. The little country of Latvia was formed. It was one of the Baltic countries along the eastern part of the Baltic Sea. Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania. And one of the interesting things about Latvia is that the language is based on Sanskrit. And it's one of two remaining languages in Europe that's based on Sanskrit, Latvian and Lithuanian. In the language that I was born into, we had some of the Pali words still there, and the names of women's names were Metta, Karuna, Mudita, Antra, which means neither here nor there, but in between. So, and one of the terms, lauks, means field. So loka, lauks. So I was kind of resonated with a language that was close to Sanskrit, but in some ways. So then Latvia gained its independence in 1918, and I was born in April of 1940. In the period of time when Latvia was about to lose its independence. In 1939, Molotov and Ribbentrop from Russia and Germany divided Europe up into their spheres of influence. This is yours, this is mine, this is how it's going to be. And so in 1940, a few months after I was born, the Russians came into Latvia because that was going to be theirs. And Latvia had about 2 million people, and the Russians, very typically, amassed on the border and said to the president, well, you want to do it without warfare, or shall we fight about it? And so the president abdicated or stepped down. The Russians they came in, set up their puppet government. The government voted to become part of the USSR, and so they took over. My father and my mother were worker bees. They were simple people, but my father was very much against the invading powers. So the Russians decided that they were going to take over by getting rid of some of the influential and the opposition people in the country. So when I was about a year old, June of 1941, the Russian troops rounded up about 15,000 Latvians, doctors, lawyers, people in the government, people who were opposed to their power. And it was families of people, babies, children, old people, the families of these more influential people were rounded up and put in cattle cars and hauled off to Siberia in workers' camps, and some of them were, the men were shot. And so a piece of karma that I don't know if my father had heard about this from somebody or whether it was just fortuitous, but he took us out to the countryside that particular night or that particular weekend. And so we evaded the roundup. And so that was coma. Great gratitude.
Mm.
Then the Germans decided, the heck with that agreement. We're just going to come back into Latvia and go into Russia. So the Germans came into Latvia in the following year, very soon after this roundup. Well, I think it was the same year, but soon after the roundup. Then the Russians started pushing the Germans back, and in 1944, when I was 4 years old, the Russian forces were coming back into Latvia. And my father and mother, particularly my father, knew that if we stayed, we would probably have quite a bad result. So we started, we boarded a German ship going back to Germany with their wounded troops. And we just followed the wave of refugees moving out of Eastern Europe and evading the Russian forces. So we were in Germany from 1944 to 1949 in a refugee settlement. The refugees were settled in their linguistic groups, in their ethnic groups, and we had school and church and cultural events, all in my native language. And so then in 1949, the world had decided that they needed to resettle the refugees. And there were quite a few countries that were taking refugees. Argentina, Brazil, I think, and the US and Canada and England. So we were another very nice stroke of karma where we had the opportunity to come to the United States. So coming to the States at the age of 9, I was plunked into school not knowing the language or anything. And in 3 months, I pretty much picked it up just being there at my age. I went through school. Then I was a good student, and I was fortunate to receive scholarships to go to university, and then eventually I worked my way with scholarships and assistance and working through medical school. So my movement had been continually going west. So along with that movement, I was in Cleveland, Ohio, in the middle of the United States, and the weather wasn't very good. So I had an opportunity to look around to see where I could settle, where the weather was nicer and maybe life would be more exciting. So I got an internship in San Diego, California. Definitely the weather was a lot nicer. And so another stroke of karma. I moved into an apartment building where I met Mark. That was in 1971. And we have been together ever since. So going on with the theme of karma and the theme of gratitude. So many things to be grateful for in my youth. Grateful for two parents that, and I was the only child, that were really responsible and very caring. So I felt very secure in my youth. Then another, being assisted to go through school. Then meeting Mark. So Mark and I, after getting married, we purchased the property with the help of my mother, and we got a 2-on-1, what they call a little house in front and another house in back. And at that time, we had to rent the house in front. So the people came to look, and eventually these two motorcycle riders came up to look at the property and see if they wanted to rent it. One of them was Marv Logan. The other one was Randy Pitstick. So Mark decided that he would rent the property to these two men, and that was another karma we had together. Mark and Marv established a bond. They had a special bond. They both liked motorcycles. and they both were interested in consciousness and the expansion of consciousness and non-ordinary consciousness. And so they had conversations about that, and around that time, there was a man that was starting to give meditation sessions, giving meditation teaching in our neighborhood, who was going to teach Vipassana. Mark told me that he and Marv were going to go and meditate, and I was a little bit uneasy about it. I thought, well, what are they gonna do? So I better go along and see what they're gonna do. So I don't want Mark to veer off on some channel and then I don't know where he is.
She thought I was gonna get real weird.
So that was another karma, because really Mark guided me to go on this path with great gratitude. Then Marv Logan went on his own path for quite a while up to San Francisco, and we did go up to San Francisco to the Still Point Institute and meditated with the other members of the group here. And we got quite involved in Vipassana and stayed with that practice for quite a few years after Marv became Bhante Vimalaramsi. We still stayed with the Vipassana and made some progress, but it stalled. It became flat. After Bhante went to Asia, we tried to keep contact with him by letters. Every once in a while he'd send him a letter saying where he is, but it was once a year or so. And but somehow our thread just stayed together. Bhante's mother lived in Escondido close by. We would call each other, "Have you heard anything from?" And we would share any news. And then, I don't know if many of you know this, even from the old timers, but at one point, he came back to the United States and he disrobed because he wanted to go around the country and visit all of his relatives and kind of, I guess maybe settle some longing or some old business or whatever within himself. So about for 2 or 3 months he disrobed, went around here, the United States, meeting all of his brothers, sisters, and other relatives. And then he said, well, that's the last time I take off the robes. I'm going to robe again. That'll be that. So then he went back. So we made contact, and I think he stayed with us for some days during that time. And then he went back to Asia. But because we had made that contact, we also made plans to visit him in Asia. So when he was in Malaysia, we visited him and spent a couple of weeks or a week with him traveling around Malaysia and touring with our son. Our son was born in '76. We had one son, and he came with us, and the 4 of us traveled around. Then Monty came back to the United States in 1998, and he stayed with us for a period of time at that time, and he stayed with his mother for a period of time, and he was in our San Diego area for about a year. He was so enthusiastic about his meditation, and that enthusiasm really influenced us. And I wanted to know more, so we arranged that first retreat in 1998 in the mountains in San Diego County. And we had 4 meditators in Bhante. And one of those meditators that was in that first retreat is still connected with the community and still meditates. And so our connection, and what I do want to say is, during that retreat, I got into the second jhana, and so I was hooked, and I wanted more. So the plan, and Mark and I were both working, so it wasn't like we had a lot of time, but I wanted to make sure that I would do some retreating with Bhante periodically to continue. And so
excuse me, but that that retreat was also the one where the 6 R's was
Germinated.
was found or established, and so he had those pieces together, and so there was a fellow on the retreat who kind of gave him a list, and he said, "This is what I think you're teaching," and so at the time, that's where he got those pieces. And the last one, which was repeat, was added by Sister Kama years later, but that was where it first arrived.
So he told me that he put that post-it in his Majjhima Nikaya, and it kind of disappeared. And he opened it up one time, and he found it again. And he went, yes. And then it became, the document. It's codified, yeah.
So those early years of Bhante's journey were difficult years for him. He would, in the next 4 or 5 years, we would try to connect with him once a year and do a retreat. I was arranging retreats in our area in Lake Elsinore, hoping that people from Los Angeles and from San Diego would come, but they were not well attended, and the retreat center was it was a very modest place, and so I got a lot of benefit about it in some ways, because Bhante's relationship to Mark was a fairly smooth relationship. My relationship to Bhante was a little bumpy, and so during those early retreats, I did a lot of walking and trying to work out all of my issues. So it was very slow going, but it was very fortunate, again, a karma, that Bhante says, well, why don't you contact Ruth Dennison at the Dhamma Dana Center in the desert in Joshua Tree and see if we can have a retreat there. I had been reticent to do that because I thought it would be too expensive and that we couldn't fill it, and that, but it worked out beautifully, because once we started to have the Joshua Tree retreats, people came, and we started filling it up, and it got to the point where we had to turn people away because it was again a very rustic, modest place. We had a couple of bathrooms, and then we had outhouses, and people were sleeping in trailers and sleeping in group. The men had their bed and a sheet, and a bed and a sheet, and the women were a little better off, but still it was very modest. And Ruth was aging, and she couldn't always guarantee that we would have a cook, so it was always a little bit like this. But one of the things that I got out of that period of time of 8 years, we really brought back the group that started in Still Point. And that was very, very important for the movement, for disseminating Bhante's teaching, I think. And the other thing was that during that period of time, I was happy. It was a 10-day retreat. I was happy just to move on to the next jhana. That is how slow things went. Anyway. So I guess what I just wanted to share with you was how from the very beginning of the teaching of the Dhamma with the twin method, how it just started out as a little seed, and how in the beginning we really had to weed and hoe and water and it was slow going, but look at what a tree it has become. So thank you for listening to my story.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
And let's take over with his.
Well, well, I wanted to say thank you to everyone who has helped put this facility, David especially, and all of those that have participated in this process, because it's a tremendous undertaking, and there's so many people that are here that have contributed to that, and it's wonderful to see what has evolved out of this forest, and I just feel really a wonderful heart connection with that. I think also one of the things that we have talked about also is the need for planning and where we're going with this, because as this idea of twin is growing, we're reaching out to a greater population, and we have a limited amount of space here. And I was thinking about this morning, that, you know, how would I feel if we had to move to a place that was bigger, or a place that had a better location, that was closer to a metropolitan area or something like that. And although this has so many attributes and things to it, you know, that could be something in the future. But I'm thinking that part of that is the planning for where we see ourselves maybe 5 years from now. Many of us, including me, are getting to a place in our lives where we're saying, yeah, you know, there's a horizon that's coming to this physical form is coming to a cessation. And so, to the extent that twin has been so beneficial for hundreds or thousands of people, how can we can make that continue to grow and to reach out? So my background in school was a business major in marketing long before the internet. But that is the reaching out to the people that, you know, that would be not only suitable, but would be inspired by coming in and using twin to open their hearts and their lives, and that message and that is what has been growing. I mean, we're looking at the results of that now, which is just wonderful. So I just feel a real wonderful connection with Bhante's teaching. I know when he came back, before he left, we were somewhat contemporaries in the fact that we had started this with a mutual interest, but when he came back, he had been addressing audiences of hundreds of people, and he said, you know, we're no longer contemporaries, but he said, if you want me to be your teacher, I will be, but that's our relationship now. I said, okay. But I went off and kind of did some other things that I was interested in terms of exploring consciousness, out-of-body experiences, remote viewing, lucid dreaming, some of the things of going into some of the other realms with the Monroe Institute and doing that sort of thing. And also in that process, Antra and I were working with a teacher for a year or so who was able to offer light and I was able to awaken that in myself, and it is an energy transfer, and I've shared that with many people here, and what I've been experimenting with it for probably the past 40 years, and it's gotten stronger and stronger with me, and so I've done it with as many as maybe 25 or 30 people or more, and I've done it with individuals, but it is a process that is helping people let go. It's a process that has a complementary application with twin, because the people who are afraid of letting go can have a direct experience right now with this energy, and it can accelerate their progress and their experience. And I've been talking with Delson about it, and part of it we've seen is because the letting go can happen so quickly, and you get visual feedback from doing it. This is also called Shaktipat. And that can be exchanged through sight, through sound, through touch, and through being in the same presence with someone who can do that. And this energy is able then to be shared. And when you receive it, it can last for a few days. The longest I've had is someone who had it, or I've shared it with, it lasted for about 2 weeks. But usually it's a lot shorter than that. But someone can come and who's been a meditator, and they have a foundation that can take this light and this energy and really move very quickly, and it's something that they can resonate with very easily. But I get myself out of the way. Mark Berger isn't there, and they are actually in control, because they can modulate how much they let go as to how much light they can receive, and then how powerful an experience they will have. And so it's quite amazing that way. And so the more time that you have, the deeper they can get, the more stillness that can take place. And so it's, as I said, a complementary kind of experience to what we are doing here. And I feel like like something that's a gift, that in this community, that I can be something of a value to the community, because it is something that it can be used to assist us or anyone in the process of their progress in the Buddha's teaching, and in using twin. So the practice is for most people, it's just an exchange of light with me, or a sitting experience. But it is, it is very, very rare. And people who have this awakening, and I've helped maybe 20 people who also are very, have a really good collected minds, have that ability also. But on the planet, it is exceedingly rare. So I feel like a resource with this community, that I can be of service and give and share this light. And so I have seen people, pay a lot of money for just one Shakti experience. I don't make anything, I don't charge anything to do that. To me, it's a special gift. And I wanted to just inform you of that, because I know some of the people here, I have had this experience, and I would invite Delson, if you want to make a comment.
Yeah, of course. Mark and I have been, at least once a month in the last 3-4 months we've been together on Zoom and doing this. So the beauty about this practice is it's not something that has to be limited to being in the same room to receive this kind